it's quiet. Like everybody was talking, and then I said, shh. Yeah, we have 2 minutes before we start, so. I'm thinking about taking about 2 minutes, right? Listen. 1 minute. Oh, Jesus. Testing.
Sojourners, Adieu, talk back with Lucille Giwa. And I think it's a very interesting title. It is not adieu. I will not accept that. I don't think this is goodbye. It's until next time. But in any case, let's talk about this wonderful exhibition that you have presented today for everyone. So I had a chance to read some of the materials that you sent me in preparation for our conversation today. And one of the things that I noted was you describing your work as sort of having a storybook kind of quality. And I think that's very evident. So I want to ask you, growing up, what kind of stories were you reading?
I think, okay, so this may not be reflective, but I remember growing up, I would like read, I grew up Catholic, let's start with that, right? And during the Mass, I would like read a lot of like the children's Bible because I was like really zoned out on everything else that was going on. And there's all the stories and everything, but I really loved the illustrations that were in the graphics. I think they looked very like fantastical. And that really stood out to me. And for me, like especially like with Catholicism, it's no longer like a belief system I align myself with. But I do remember like those key developmental moments from growing up and being like, wow, like I'm trying to put my brain somewhere else and like look at all these pretty pictures, and it was a nice place to like escape into. And so I feel like those are some of the pictures and some of the graphics and illustrations that really come to mind when I think about like my history with my style.
And I think it's obvious to say that on some level that did influence your work.
For sure, yeah. 100%. Am I allowed to swear? Well, it's my thing, yes. Yeah, 100%. Like it is, it did influence me, and it definitely, I'm very much someone that believes in documentation, right? And so regardless, there are a lot of experiences, a lot of people I've met along the lines that I will still keep in spaces. I'll still keep the pictures of them, even if I am not on speaking terms with them. Because for me, the story is really important, right? Like that documentation, there's a lot of like allegory and like Christian allegory and like, analogies in my work, because at the end of the day, that is still a part of where I came from. And so I think I would 100% say that influenced my work.
And in terms of other influences, who or what has also influenced your work?
I would say people that come to mind are like two main people right off the bat. Adebayo Adebolaji, who is this amazing Yoruba artist, I believe, based in the UK, and he was one of the first people I saw with the black style, like just kind of painting black people in black. And I love the idea of like the way that the colors pop outside when you just paint black people in black. And so that really stood out to me. His work is a lot more abstract with it. But when I think about another tie into like my expressions of like fantasy and whimsy and surrealism, I think about Kidding Lindsay. They're a wonderful Jamaican artist. They were based in Canada, but they also repatriated recently back to Jamaica. And they really focused on that interesting fantasy style of depicting black people. So I feel like when I think about who influences my work, like those two names come to mind, but not to leave out one of my amazing mentors, Yumi or Malay. who has such a wonderful way with merging, like with the uncanny valley, right? Like he's so good at putting like heads where they're not supposed to be, teeth where they're not supposed to be, and like it feels like you're looking at like all those pictures. It feels like what am I even looking at right now, right? I love that melding of spaces and places and faces and personality. And I love being confused when I look at a piece of work. For me, my work is more important to me that you feel something. You can tell me that you don't like my work. I encourage you to. But does it make you feel something? And that is my goal. So I think when work gives people pause, I think that's something that is really important to me. And these are all people whose work has given me pause.
Let's talk a little bit more about your color palette. You mentioned painting people of African descent as black so that other colors pop out. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely evident in looking at your work that there are certain colors that you gravitate to. How do you select your colors? What's the meaning behind the other colors as opposed to just the color black, which you already spoke to?
Mm-hmm. I think I've always been someone that is passionate about color. You would see in, for example, one of my oldest paintings, Yamoja, that is on the booth wall. It's not in that style, right? And it kind of like sticks out a little bit, like a sore thumb. I've always been such a colorful painter. I think there is so much to say about the way that our environment influences us. I remember when I was in my first year at Ottawa, I had this class, and it was like an English comprehension class, and they made us do this reading. And it was talking about this specific artist, how it was relating to how this artist paints with a lot of blues and grays because they grew up in the winter, right? Winters were a big thing for them. But I grew up in Nigeria, there's no winter there, highest rainy season, no Hamatan. So I'm used to seeing reds, I'm used to seeing oranges, I'm used to seeing that warmth, and so I feel like I find myself gravitating towards like brightness and vibrancy. But when it comes to how that related in my style, I found that maturity really came at that point, like at the end of 2020, which is when I painted my first piece in my style, which was Chaos. If you see it, it's on like this wall, it's like a pride flag, right? And the red piece was the first piece I ever painted. So that piece gave birth to the rest of the style, like everything else that you see in that room. And for me, it was so important because not only is it just colorful, but it really talks about the way that like Black people bring out the color in everywhere we are. Right? We have the sauce, we have the way that our culture just makes everything brighter and more passionate and more fun and more playful, and we have just been so resilient in so many different genres of oppression, right? Whether it's settler colonialism, whether it's this, whether it's that, whether it's transatlantic slavery, we have still found a way to make spaces brighter despite. But sometimes the brightness around the spaces can distract from the real focus, which is us. So which is why I really do love the conversation between the Black form and then the colors around it, because they are in harmony, but they're also kind of fighting.
It's interesting to hear you talk about Nigeria, because I think you have multiple identities. One of them, in some ways, being Canadian as well, because you spent quite a bit of time here. But at the same time, you are still, I think, a settler or an immigrant to this land. What has your experience as an immigrant meant for your work and for your creative voice?
I think I would not be able to put that, none of that work would exist without me immigrating here. Without a doubt, none of that work out there, it wouldn't look the same, it wouldn't feel the same. I think there is a kind of freedom that came with being outside of Nigeria. If you know anything about me, I'm so proud of being Nigerian. It is one of the things I am most grateful at. In the next life, I would love to be Nigerian as well. But at the same time, it does not mean that does not come with its difficulties. It does not mean that does not come with having to be resilient to a fault. It does not mean that it does not come with a certain level of obnoxiousness. It does not mean that it doesn't come, there's so much that it comes with, right? And so in leaving that space, it was when I came here, for people that don't know, I came into my queerness in 2020. And it was very interesting because my marketing skills are so great. You would think I've known I was queer all my life. That's not my job, period. But I think a big part of that was having that distance to be wait a minute, I'm allowed to actually be who I want to be because I'm not in as close proximity to all of those real tangible laws and all of those subcultures that are holding me back. And so I think my work wouldn't really look the same way without me having that distance. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of people that I grew up in places where people are predominantly Black can relate to this. There is, you really realize you're white. You're not white, just, you really realize you're Black when you come here. You really be Jesus. You really realize that, and I think, growing up, we watch Disney Channel, we watch all these things, we watch all these movies, Mnet and that, and, it's not white people didn't exist, but, you didn't have to encounter that direct level of beauty standard change, or that direct level of, really being stared at, or being, isolated and feeling you actively have to code switch in that way. So I feel the style, especially when it relates to Blackness in conversations with the colors around it, would not come to be if I did not come here, because there's a certain level of isolation I needed to experience to even be able to communicate that. So I think they're very interlinked, but at the same time, coming here has also given me a lot of freedom, a lot of space to exist and be and free and love and laugh and cry and I always talk about how there's a certain tenderness that we are not raised with as Nigerians and as Black people in general. I don't think we're raised to be tender. We're raised to really deal with a lot and be resilient. So I think being able to come here gave me enough space from what I was raised in to really sit and reflect.
So that's interesting because you talk about what it means to be away from Nigeria and how that's impacted your work. Mm-hmm. But you came to Ottawa, which I think is a very specific place. I think for myself, being from Montreal, coming to Ottawa, it's not the same. So a place isn't a place is a place, right? This is a very specific place, Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And I think for artists, it's also a very specific place. I think if you had left Nigeria and gone to Montreal or gone to Toronto, I think you would have had potentially a very different experience. How do you think you coming to Ottawa and living here influenced your practice? So outside of the fact that you're away from Nigeria, so you have this freedom, what do you think Ottawa brought to that specifically to that conversation between you and your art?
I think I've always been someone that gives the vibe of I live in a big city, but I actually don't. I even in Nigeria, I live in Abuja, which is a smaller city, and I feel being from Ottawa has given me time to chill. I feel there's a lot less pressure to be creative. If that makes sense, I feel when it comes to Montreal's such a creative space. It's a space for creatives. And almost not oversaturated, but somewhat towards that effect. There's a pressure of okay, how creative are you? Even Toronto. Toronto's literally the worst. No shade. No shade, don't jump me. But there's like a lot of expectation of creativity, and I felt like being in Ottawa really gave me the space to like grow into that. Because I remember the first time I saw a work of art that inspired me to actually want to actively be active in the Ottawa art scene. I think it was around 2020. Like I had already been here for a little bit, and I had already been painting, but just as a more private practice, I feel like I didn't feel rushed, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I also kind of felt isolated. You know, like I felt like there at that point in time I didn't know about the Ottawa Black Arts Kollective, right? Like I was fresh off the boat, you know? So if there was a level of isolation towards that, I wasn't really in community with a lot of artists at that point in time. So it was a lot of me, you know, seeing, for example, like my mentor, Yumi. I saw his work at the Ottawa Art Gallery. I saw it in the annex, and I remember seeing it. I'm like, his name looks Nigerian. I'm gonna find him on Instagram. And like literally finding him on Instagram, following him, reaching out, saying that I saw your work, it meant XYZ to me, and like just keeping in contact from there, being able to build a relationship from there. I think it was isolating at first, and that happened in 2020. So I remember those first 2 years, it was very much like, I guess I'm an artist, but I haven't really done that in a while, you know?
What does this collection reveal about you as a person and as an artist?
Nazi had one. Right.
And I'm asking that because I think that there's definitely a lot of passion that's gone into this work. There's a lot of emotion that's gone into this work, and it's very personal work.
I think it's, for me at least, is a certain level of intimacy. I think I am a very open person. I am the kind of person that like you can meet in a day and we can have like a 2-hour conversation about trauma and this and that and the third. But openness and vulnerability and intimacy are two different things. I think for me, why I have really struggled to sell my art over the years, and a lot of people kind of attest to this because they've asked me, is because for me, it's my mental health, you know, like I've been painting since I was 3 years old. It's the longest relationship I've ever had. And there are lots of times where I'm working on a piece and it would take me, sometimes it takes me 2-3 days, depending on the size. Sometimes it takes me over a year. And the reason being is that there were lots of experiences that I had not had that I needed to have to finish that piece. And so whilst being in therapy, I am doing that in tandem of painting. And I think as an artist, it's very important to me to have different kinds of practices. The girls know I'm in ballroom, and that's something that brings me so much joy and has helped me reclaim so much aspects of myself. But that is a very public practice. I'm in theater, that's a very public practice. You know, like I do a lot of public speaking, that's a very public practice. And what that means is that it is ingested and digested in real time. So if I screw up, you see that live, right? It's very open to opinions immediately. But when I'm painting, I'm often by myself. And I don't have a full face of makeup on, I don't DJ, you know how our house has been looking recently. Like, turn that into a studio, man. If you look at, I'll be looking a mess, I'll have to say, you know, but lopsided, you know? And it's a level of intimacy and vulnerability and transparency that it's very unique to my painting, specifically because of how long I've been doing it. So as you're walking through the exhibition, I really want you to understand that I am sharing the most intimate parts of myself with you. The parts of myself that is masking, the parts of myself that doesn't know the right words to say, the parts of myself that is neurodivergent and like sometimes is not perfect and is really struggling with not being perfect and is really struggling to communicate and be okay with that. You know, the parts of myself that is a bitch, the parts of myself that is not PR trained. That is what you're experiencing in that room. And it's really emotional. Like, it's really like even being able to see all of the pieces like that and see all of the time, because so the big thing about this exhibition is time. When you are an immigrant, you enter this country knowing that once you get your papers, you are on a ticking clock. Your time starts now. And for a lot of us, we've had that time run out. A lot of us have pushed that time running out. And so for me, it's particularly emotional and vulnerable to see what I have done with that time.
Living under that clock, how do you think that's manifested in the work? Because you talk about the pressure that you're under, knowing that you're basically creating within a particular time span, because you know it's running out, right? So how do you think that impacted your work, knowing in the back of your mind that time is running out potentially?
I think the piece of that is like the loudest in is Time Through Love. I think that was the piece, the first big piece I had made since I decided that I could not do this anymore. And it was such a difficult piece to make because I did really feel like I didn't have time. I finished the piece on Tuesday. I finished it on Tuesday and I started painting it last summer, and it took time. And it took time because there were so many things I had not experienced that I needed to experience before finishing it. And there's this aspect of fear when it comes to traveling and leaving a space that you know. There is the fear of what am I going to come in, like what's going to become of me, right? Because our environments have such an important impact on who we are and how we move. Like I am so honored and blessed to have such a wonderful support system.
Don't do it.
No, I know.
It's not 7 p.m.
It's not 7 p.m. You're right. Hey, somebody play elevator music. I am so honored to have a community that has been so loving to me and support system that has been so loving to me. And I call my friends my board of directors because we don't make any important decisions. Like, I just want you to know if I flirted with you in this room, you and 10 of my friends were texting you. Me and 10 of my friends were texting you. Yes. I'm so honored and blessed to have people that kind of hug me and hold me and remind me who I am when I can't remember who I am. And so with me leaving, there's a lot of fear of what's going to happen when those people are not physically there. And so in that piece, Love Through Time to Love, I am looking at myself, and I'm looking at myself in different forms. One form is more jagged, one form is more smooth, one form is more masculine, one form is more feminine, and there are so many differences, but it's still me. And that was one of my first pieces, really challenging myself to not just paint joy, but paint love. And paint romantic love and intimate love and caring love. And it was hard because a lot of my portraits that you'll find are of just one person, or if it's people, it's smaller. And so it was difficult because I had to do the work of reassuring myself in real time that I will love you regardless of what you look like in this new environment you're going to be in. And so the time that is physically represented on that piece is 10:18 a.m. And that was the time I was born. And so there were a lot of like intentional decisions made in that piece. And like even with like, for example, how the background is very triangular and like almost cubic and sharp, but they're sitting on a soft pillow. And so there's a lot of meeting points of like dissimilarity where it's allowed to be messed up right now. It's allowed to be confusing. You're allowed to not know who you are, or not know what you identify as, or not know where you're gonna be, or not know where you're gonna live. Like, yeah, that's okay. But you have to make that decision to love yourself despite that. Because I'm so, like I said, I'm so grateful to have my friends there that have reminded me of who I am. But no one can love insecurity away for you.
Facts.
Like no amount of, like movie nights, no amount of hugs, no amount of grand prizes, no amount of that can love the insecurity in you. So that was me declaring to myself that no matter what time passes, I will be here. We go there together. No shaking. And so that was a piece that really came through that feeling of like losing time. There's enough time. There's enough time. There's enough.
I've got about 2 other questions, but I'd also like to let the audience know that after that, I'd like to open it up if anybody has, if you have any questions for Lucille, we'll be able to ask them in a few moments. So I'm going to ask a very selfish question right now, Lucille. It's a self-serving question for OBAC, the Ottawa Black Arts Kollective. We've been around for a while. I'll say, when you speak of time, we went into the pandemic as one type of entity, and we came out a very different kind of collective, and we're still very much on that journey. As a Black creative, what do you think OBAC can do to better support Black artists in the city?
I think something that would be very important is making yourself known. Because I think for me, when I first came in, I was like, I didn't know what OBAC was. Right? I didn't know that there was an OBAC. Right? I think the more artists know about OBAC, like I appreciate the curatorial fellowship that happened, but I think there needs to be like more programming to like kind of bridge those gaps in community, like, and more programming that is outside of the frame of professional work. Like there needs to be like that active community building, like whether it's a SIPA paint or like, things that like are low STEM, that people that may not feel ready to have their work and like apply to such a big art like gallery like OAG, like people that actually want to mix and mingle. They're still building confidence in their work, but need like a low STEM space to do that. Like I think activities like, for example, like I said, SIPA paint. The other day, I went to this amazing event, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Strings Attached. I don't know if they're here. I saw them earlier today, like one of the organizers, where there was rage quilting. I know, it was wonderful. It was a beautiful experience, and there was also a sound bath section where people could just really participate, and you didn't have to know how to quilt or how to make music. You could just be there as a creative, as a person. And I think those same things that give room for community conversations, but also like people to meet people, would be very helpful to actually like build that community feeling, because it reminds me of ballroom, I would say. Like,
island discs, are you familiar with that?
no.
So I'll explain a little bit about how this is going to work. So the idea is that you're on an island with all of your beloved artworks, and a wave comes by and it's going to take all of the artwork away, save one. Which artwork would you save and why?
I think the piece that I would save is Platform. It's not the biggest piece in there. I think it's about 16 by 20. But it's a piece that I had when I had just started developing my style. And I was still testing the limits of what I can and cannot create. So I was not confident at all. It was during the pandemic, and me and one of my closest friends, McKaden, we were like basically like locked in. She was a visual arts major, and so like she would really like encourage me to create and paint because she was painting all the time. And I wasn't really confident in my style at that point in time. I was still like figuring out how do I layer black on top of black and like, you know, make it a little gray so that it doesn't just look like plain black. I was really thinking. And I remember just really enjoying the process. You know, I enjoying the sketch beforehand. And I love painting on wood. Like, painting on wood is smooth. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's so soft, right? Which is actually kind of anticlimactic. But it was such a wonderful experience, and like, where I surprised myself by what I could do. But also, the piece itself is about trimming and pruning and growing and germinating and blooming into yourself. And it's like, just to describe it, it's a vase of a black body, and like there are different like flowers that are coming out of it, but the flowers are people. And there are hands kind of coming from underneath, like kind of like little picking at it. And I love the conversation about creation, that it made me feel like in its point in time where we're in the pandemic, we're all locked in, you know, there's nothing to do, we can't go outside. It made me feel some semblance of control, but also building for like the lovely unexpected of not knowing how that painting was going to turn out. So that is a piece I would carry with me. I'm like, you know, RIP to the rest, but yeah.
Thank you very much, Lucille. You're absolutely wonderful and amazing. And you and I have had several conversations, and we know that you no longer being in Ottawa is going to be a great loss for this city, but you will be back. I think that's something that we all will be planning towards. So my original plan was to leave a little bit more time for Q&A, but I still think we do have some time for folks to ask you some questions. So I think I'll turn it over to the audience. I'll come around with the mic. Does anyone have a question? If you put your hand up, I think I might be able to see you. If you have any questions.
Hi. Okay, so something's on my mind because I just came from another artist talk downstairs for Catherine Tepani.
Okay.
And something that she was talking about was, healing in public in her work, and then doing that in service of those who are healing in private, right? And so I was thinking about that when I was looking at your work today, and, then thinking about it again when you were talking about your public practice in ballroom and theater and the private practice of your painting work. But then, when you have gallery shows and shows like this, and, when you share your work publicly online, it is public, right? So I don't know, I was thinking about that, and I was curious what your thoughts are on that, what it means to you to heal in public, if that's something that you see as present in your work, and what the role of that is for those that are healing in private.
First of all, that's a beautiful question. That is an absolutely beautiful question. And it's something that, I feel so passionately and strongly about. I've had to do lots of healing in public over the years. And it's one of those things that takes a certain level of strength. It takes a certain level of strength, but it also takes a certain level of frustration. And the reason why I say that is I found myself being someone that would take a lot of shit and give people very, very long ropes and, just be this well and epitome of grace. And then I'd have to get frustrated to a specific point to actually do something about it. And I think when it comes to healing in public, it's a similar feeling of frustration where it's and you know what? I'm actually tired of secluding myself. I'm going through it. Is that okay with you? This specific feeling of really letting people know that I'm not a performer, I am a human being. And there's something so empowering in letting people know that you are flawed. You are flawed, you are not perfect. Or rather, maybe we need to change our idea of what perfection means. Because I think when it comes to healing in public, it's so interesting. Me and a lot of artists, we make a lot of jokes about how whenever people ask about your art, it's this happened to me when I was 12, and that was traumatic for me, so I painted this. And it can be a lot of regurgitating and reminding yourself and re-triggering as well. But at the same time, I would much rather be able to share, and I'm grateful and privileged to be in a place where I can share. And I do have the capacity to do that, right? It's not all of my pieces that are out here today, but the ones I'm comfortable sharing with, I do. But it is very important to remind people that you are allowed to heal, and it's okay. It's okay if you do it in private, it's okay if you do it in public, it's okay. But people need to know that recovery does not look like one thing. It's not linear. You don't have to, seclude yourself and then show up and, hey girl, everything's good, we're fine. No, you're allowed to be broken and be in public. You're allowed to feel broken and be in public. And when you really think about it, everybody's fucking broken. And that's the fact. We live in the economy we live in and in the social climate we live in today, nobody's okay. No one. And so I think when it comes to healing in public, I really ask myself that question of, do I have the capacity to be brave? And I understand bravery not doing something because it's easy or it's simple, but doing something despite the fact that it's hard and despite the fact that it's difficult and it might be embarrassing and it might be cringe and it might be weird and it might rub people the wrong way or people might not be ready to handle it. But if you are healing, if you know that you are setting that example for someone else to heal, because there's so many of my pieces that I hear people talk about how they resonate with it and how it's moved them and made them feel certain types of ways. And it makes me emotional because it's the fact that my feelings can do this for you. There's a piece out there, The Trees Have Eyes, where initially when I had painted it, it was about feeling surveilled, feeling watched at my every corner, and feeling very anxious about it. But I heard someone talk about it, and they were talking about how they felt like those eyes were protecting them. And so one thing about like healing in public is that it can have unintended consequences. And there's always something beautiful about leaving room for the lovely unexpected. So it is about gauging your capacity and what you have capacity to do. But as much as I can, I will share my work because I feel like it's not just for me, but for people that feel the same or feel similarly. Thank you for that question. Zoe boy.
Hi, hubby. I wanted to ask, in your time and in your experience in painting, has there been any piece that you originally had a meaning for it, and as you painted it, the meaning changed for you?
A lot of them. I think I try my best to, especially now, like I used to paint a lot more freeform. Like for example, like the emoji painting you saw there was a lot more like shwa 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 shwa, right? But then the more technical I got with my work, the more I started getting into like the black form in the way that I have, the more I had to do a lot more planning around it. Like I had to do a lot more planning, right? And I think what I try my best to do is start with a feeling. So I'll use Giwa in the room as an example, that really big elephant that's next to the really small elephant. That's really, really cute. Giwa in the room came from a place of feeling too big and feeling like an elephant in the room. For those who don't know, Giwa is my name, my legal name, and it means elephant. And when I thought about creating that piece, what came to mind is something that is too big for its space, right? Like I like the first thought that came to my mind was like playing with size, right? But I didn't think of doing it in a dollhouse. And so with more time, I got to like flesh out the idea and think about what that dollhouse meant to me and like what the performative, because like at the end of the day, a dollhouse is a place where like people play and they play characters and they play roles, right? And so with time, that idea was able to build because there's a reason why there's the baby Giwa that's right next to it, and then there's Giwa in the room. Baby Giwa was a piece that was created in 2023, and it started with the idea of an elephant that was like too big for its space. And that was kind of when I was really just coming into my queerness. I was still in the closet, and just feeling really repressed by that. But the subject matter became a lot more complex the more spaces I was in, right? Because it wasn't just a living room anymore. It was, what's it like being Giwa in a workplace that I'm the only Black person in? What's it like being Giwa in a space filled with queer people? For example, like Ballroom is there, right? And like, what's it like being gender nonconforming in that space? And like, what's it like having those conversations about those levels of transness that people are not ready to discuss, right? Like, there's a lot of levels, and so beings are allowed to change and flow and ebb. And I find that it can be frustrating, especially when you're making art over a period of time and like you have a vision and things are pushing you and wind is blowing in other directions and you want to try other things. And I think something that I would say to any aspiring artist of any kind is build for the lovely unexpected. Because sometimes the reason why you haven't finished that piece is because there's a lot of things you haven't experienced, like I said, that is going to inform what brushstroke you want to make and what technique you want to use and what you want to say. So I think really giving myself space to, yes, I can start with a plan, or really giving myself space to ebb and flow and reconnect or disconnect from the original plan has given me not just a space to create more complex stories, but also like build on stories, because sometimes like if we like a painting, we can make another one and make it bigger and just change the subject matter, right? Like you were in the room. So I think that was really revolutionary for me to allow myself to like let things change and not just be stuck in who I was when I first created that. I hope I answered your question. Okay, thank you.
Last call. Any more questions? So, as I said, it's not adieu, but until next time. And I think the last question it might be something that's on a lot of folks' mind, which is what's next. So I think before I sort of turn it over to you for the last word, maybe you can also tell us what's next.
Okay. So what's next for me is I am getting my Master's of Fine Art. Thank you. I'm getting it in an interdisciplinary program called Low Residency MFA at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Thank you. It's expensive. Right. It was hard. Right. Exactly. And I am focusing on studying Black joy, and Black joy because I found that a lot of my work centered around grief and processing that. And I think while grief is an important subject matter to tackle, I don't just want to discuss grief, right? So my MFA is focusing on Black joy through the use of body modification, body movement, and body depiction. So body modification is going to be through tattoos, body movement is going to be through ballroom, and body depiction is going to be through paintings. So, So I'm really excited to be able to use these three facets of my life that I'm very, very passionate about and that have changed my life and the way that I see the world. And being able to bring them to spaces that are seen as more professional. Specifically, painting is seen, it does have that clout, but specifically with tattooing and being in ballroom as well, right? I feel like these are not just community forms, but art forms that are not as recognized as they should be because of their cultural impact worldwide. And so I'm really excited to be part of a long list of people that are trying to formalize and give and explore these concepts in more academic and scholarly ways. So, yeah. Just as a closing, well, not necessarily as a closing note, because we're here until 10, really, unless you have to go, But kind of just end this, I do really want to thank everybody that has come out today. I cannot tell you what it means to be here right now. Nothing could have told Lucille, Giwa back in 2018 that they would be sitting in front of all of you here and having these conversations, having this amount of work to show. I think, and having this community, honestly, to lean on, I think it's been such a pleasure. I have people here from Montreal, right? I have people here from Toronto, I have so many loved ones, and people that really give a shit. And I really appreciate, I appreciate the investment in me and my work. I appreciate all of, right. Not gonna cry, it's not 7 yet. I appreciate all of the effort and the investment and all of the curiosity and just all of the love, whether the love has been communicated, whether it's just been felt. I appreciate and I receive all of it. I want to thank specifically the amazing team of people that put this together today. We put everything that you see today happened today. Right, like just for some context, people set up exhibitions a week or so in advance. Like everything happened today, and I'm so grateful for everyone that came through today to really just make this the exhibit of my dreams. Yeah, I'm so grateful, and I feel so filled with love. And one thing I can say, I'm going through it. I can say this, that, and the third, but I can never say I don't feel loved. And I appreciate that a lot. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the work. Please talk to me. Have your opinions. If you hate it, come talk to me. If you love it, come talk to me. And also buy the work. Right. Like you already heard me say I don't want to sell my baby. So the fact that I'm selling it, right, buy it. And just thank you so much, and thank you to you, Monique, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to do this for me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the show, and just have a great day.